EPZ has been featured here a few times, offering IEMs that tend to perform pretty well at competitive prices in the budget space. Today we're going to look at their Q5 Pro. Now, these were sent in by EPZ, but like always, I'm free to give my honest thoughts and opinions on them. The Q5 Pro seems like a refresh of the very popular Q5, which got a lot of praise for its sound quality while being competitively priced at around $50. I reviewed the Q5 about a year ago, and while I did like a lot about it, there were a few things that I was critical about at the time. Some points that I made I still agree with, but some of my views have changed over time. The Q5 Pro remains similarly priced as the original, and keeps much of the good things about the Q5 while making some slight tweaks which I feel do improve the IEM overall. Let's just start off by covering the sound. The original Q5 was very much praised in the community for its sound, which was similar to Harman, but with a little bit more mid-bass and treble. It was a pretty popular tuning choice at the time, but the Q5 also had a little bit of extra treble, which did make the IEM sound a bit more snappy and relatively detailed compared to some of its competition. At the time of my first review, I was a little critical though about some of the extra treble, since I felt sensitive to it at the time when listening at louder volumes. And it also depended on what music and songs I was listening to at the time, if they were a bit brighter in their mix. With that said, the original Q5 was quite good overall, and in my opinion, going back to trying it now, it still sounds better than the IEM that it was inspired by. The Q5 Pro keeps much of the same sound philosophy as the Q5, and just by looking at the frequency response graph alone, it seems like they should pretty much sound mostly the same. Although, in my own listening and in my ear, the Pro does feel like the treble presentation is slightly different, and like the emphasis of the treble in my ear is shifted a bit more into the higher frequencies than the original. I think in this specific case, the reason for the difference is probably just due to how they fit in my ears. Both IEMs are quite small, but still have relatively deep fitting nozzles, but the overall size of the Pro is also slightly smaller than the original, and I think that this may be giving it a slightly deeper fit and insert in my ear, which could explain the difference in the sound that I'm hearing. You can see a similar effect to this show up on a graph just by inserting the IEM a bit deeper into the ear simulator. The deeper that it's inserted, the higher the resonance shifts on the graph, and often the low treble, which is usually my sensitive area, is also slightly decreased. So it is probably the slight difference in fit that is having the most effect on my listening difference between the two IEMs. So with that aside, sound-wise I think the Q5 Pro is pretty much the same as the old model, and I think that was intentional. It's a popular tuning that delivers a pretty balanced sound overall, but still has just a little bit extra treble to bring out some small details in songs, as well as making the bass sound just a little bit clearer and more defined in its presentation. The other more major changes in this IEM between the new version and the original seems to be mostly just in the design and the cable. The Q5 Pro has a new design, which does make the IEM slightly smaller than its predecessor. It tries to keep similar design cues and colors, but still come across as its own thing. The Q5 Pro also uses a 2-pin connector this time rather than MMCX like the Q5, and I see that as an upgrade as I do prefer the 2-pin connectors. It just gives a lot more options if you plan to change out the cables. As well, I do find 2-pin connectors to be a bit more reliable, and offer a little bit of a more secure fit when the ear hooks are shaped correctly for your ear. Unfortunately, the new cable itself does suffer a little bit compared to the old model. The new cable is thinner but also stiffer, so it ends up feeling a bit springy and like it always wants to go back to its previous shape. But since we're on 2-pin this time, it is easy to swap out. EPZ also sent a small USB dongle DAC along with the Q5 Pro to review. And usually I'm not the most comfortable reviewing source gear as I don't have that much experience in covering those, so I'll just be brief on that, or more brief than I normally am. The DAC that they sent is their TP35. It uses dual CS43198 chips. The shell of the DAC is made of aluminum and features a plastic window to see the chips inside. On one end, it has a USB-C port and includes a short USB-C cable, which is actually quite flexible, so it works well if you were to just plug it into your phone and then put the whole thing into your pocket. On the other end, it has a 3.5mm jack and a 4.4 balanced output. And on the side, it has volume rockers as well, and it's around the same price as the IEMs at about $50. From my use with it, it works well and it's convenient. And I do like that the cable is a bit more flexible than some other dongle DACs, but you probably know I'm not huge on spending a lot on source gear. Overall, the Q5 Pro seems like a good successor to the Q5, and I do think that this is a good IEM that can compete well in the $50 price range.